Have you ever noticed that it seems like everything has a warning label? And actually, we have so many of these warnings that it seems even the most normal things aren't safe. Granted, there are some warnings in life that just make sense. For example, the warning on Tide Pods used to wash your clothes. Now, you would assume people would understand that if you use a chemical to clean your clothes, you probably shouldn't eat that chemical for dessert or infamy online. Good assumption. But now there's a warning on the container that pods may be harmful if swallowed. Seems like a no-brainer, but apparently it wasn't. Here's another warning I saw at a horse ranch. Warning, horses may kick, bite, and fart. It doesn't get more vivid or clear than that. And again, I think we can agree that this concept should be common knowledge. But apparently, someone learned the hard way that a gassy horse could have space issues. So someone else actually took the trouble to create, print, and display that sign. But then on the other end of the common sense spectrum, you have warnings that go beyond crazy. I've got a few examples. A wheelbarrow warning that says, not intended for highway use. One on a baby stroller, remove child before folding. Or how about this warning I once saw on Apple's website? Do not eat the iPod Shuffle. And finally, this warning on an electric drill. This product not intended for use as a dental drill. How many of you just cringed hearing that last one? Same. We have a warning for just about everything in our life. And all of the examples are pretty funny and even seem sort of useless. I mean, come on. Do we really need to be told not to eat an iPod Shuffle? And I'm saying all this because we don't just see warnings in everyday life, right? We see and hear them right here in church. Let's be honest. It can feel like we have a lot of warnings here at church. We've heard warnings against all kinds of activities and choices. And all of these bad choices boil down to one word and concept: sin. And the word immediately has a negative vibe, right? Well, guys, whether you've been coming to church for a long time or this is your first time here, we are all familiar with this general idea of sin. We know that a sin is something bad and therefore something we should not do. But here's the interesting thing about our view of sin. All of us apply a scale to it, right? Maybe you've never thought about that before or about it a ton, but let's say that a scale goes from 1 to 10. Over on the 10 side of the scale, we have some sins that everyone agrees are not right, like ever. Murder, automatic big time sin. Everyone knows this. What about stealing from someone? I mean, if we're honest, that ranks at about a 7 on the sin scale. Not okay, but not necessarily deserving extreme punishment. But then we have sins that we slot on the other end of the scale. For instance, lies may be bad, but are sometimes justified. And what about white lies? If someone asks you how they look and you don't think that outfit is doing them any favors, should you really tell them the truth? Obviously not if you want to stay friends. So white lies, let's give them a 2. Or what about cheating? Okay, yes, you copied someone on your last science test. You don't cheat on every test. And if you fail science, that could affect your chance of getting into a good school and ultimately having a good career. Down the road, is this cheating really going to matter? Won't the end justify the means? We'll give that a 3 on the sin scale. Maybe you've thrown some big time shade at someone behind their back, but hey, they deserved it. You didn't do what they did, you just exposed it. That sounds like a 1 on the sin scale. All that to say, this is my point. We all understand that certain things are just wrong. But when something falls lower on the sin scale, we tend to downgrade its importance, which leaves us wondering, are some sins really such a bad thing? Everyone, even Christians, can put sin on a scale, which can leave us feeling confused when some sin seems worse than others. But hello, murder really is worse than cheating on an algebra quiz, right? So what's the real story then? Plus, in week 1, we learned that Jesus wants us to be free people, and that means we can have a relationship with God despite what we've done. So, is it really all that bad? If you're a Jesus follower, what's the deal with sin? Well, to answer all these questions, we're going to look back again at Galatians. Quick recap, this book isn't really a book. It was a letter written by the Apostle Paul for a church he started in Galatia. an ancient city located in what is now Turkey. At that point in history, Christianity was brand new. They didn't have a Bible like we have today. So everybody was trying to figure out just what following Jesus should look like. Remember, we talked a couple weeks ago about the do's and don'ts that many Jewish believers had grown up with, so that left these new Christians wondering, in order to follow Jesus, what do we have to do and what can we not do? Sounds like a variation of our question of sin, right? And it was. No matter how you ask the question, it boils down to this. Where's the line? What sin on the scale are more important sins? So Paul wrote this response to their question. You will always harvest what you plant. Those who live only to satisfy their own sinful nature will harvest decay and death from that sinful nature. But those who live to please the Spirit will harvest everlasting life from the Spirit. So let's not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. It's important to understand the world in which Paul wrote this letter. Today, when we need food, we just go to the grocery store and buy what we need. But in the ancient world, a lot of people were involved in agriculture or farming. It was essential to their survival. Most people were very familiar with how to grow crops. Farming 101 is the idea of planting and reaping. If you plant corn, you're eventually going to get corn. If you plant wheat, you won't be surprised when you actually grow wheat. What you plant now determines what you harvest later. It's not rocket science. So when Paul compared choices and outcomes to planting and harvesting, his audience understood exactly what he was saying. Paul was saying that your choices now will determine what you will eventually harvest. It's just as true for your life as it is for planting crops. Your decisions will someday bear fruit. It may not happen tomorrow, and it may not even happen next year, but every choice, every action is planting seeds for your future. Paul is saying, if you will one day harvest what you've planted, what do you want that harvest to look like? And instead of providing a simple list of what to do and what not to do, Paul tells the Galatians, those who live only to satisfy their own sinful nature will harvest decay and death from that sinful nature. Man, that's some strong language, right? But Paul is just saying straight up, bad choices are going to lead to bad outcomes. It's just how life works. So maybe you don't consider gossip a major sin, but if you continually plant gossip, then you will eventually get the result of gossip. You may ruin a friendship this year, or maybe that harvest will happen in the future. Maybe someone will carry those hurtful words with them for years after high school. Or if you continually choose to not study and instead cheat to pass certain classes in high school, you may not have the foundation you need for advanced courses in college. Or if you continue to tell lies, you may not be trusted in the future. If you continue to sin and how you treat your body isn't gonna last long. If you continue to use drugs or alcohol or sex to cope, you may harvest addiction or just an inability to deal with stress in life the right way. Trust me, guys, I get it. I was just in your shoes a few years ago. But at the end of the day, Paul knew that if you followed Jesus, you would experience life. But if you continue to plant things that will hurt you, you'll eventually get hurt. But there's also good news here, because if you're planting good decisions, you're going to experience a harvest of life. Again, what you plant is what you're going to harvest. And Paul isn't just talking about good decisions, harvesting happiness. He's talking about harvesting the things that Jesus talked about: joy, peace, or rest. That's what Jesus meant when he said this: my purpose is to give them a rich and satisfying life. Some translators use the word abundant here instead of rich. Imagine an abundance of peace, something more than enough, an abundance of joy, more than you expected, or an abundance of satisfaction, more than you'd hope. What you plant now, you will harvest later. Do you want parents who trust you next semester? Then plant telling the truth this semester. Do you want good friendships? Then plant seeds of integrity and honesty. Do you want to be a good husband or wife one day? then plant seeds of treating your dating partners with respect. Do you want to be good with money? Then plant seeds of spending wisely right now. And why do this? To be right with God? No. Jesus took care of that. We follow God's instructions for our lives now because free people know their now affects their later. Following Jesus isn't about keeping score or weighing out sin. It's about freedom and life. Jesus wants you to experience an abundant life, a full harvest of good life. But you don't start a harvest without harvesting. You've got to start a harvest by planting now. That's why Paul wanted the Galatians to know that no matter what you plant, there will eventually be a harvest. Freedom now, freedom later. Who knew that being free people had so much to do with planting and harvesting? Let's go back real quick to our original conversation about sin. Jesus wants us to be free, and he has already set us free from the ultimate cost of sin and separation from God. But here's the thing, we can still harvest the consequences of sin. If we plant poor choices, we harvest poor outcomes. But when we're careful in what we're sowing now, we clear the way to experience a free future. A future free from painful consequences, and a future free from regret. Believe me, I could tell you story after story of my own life. I could tell you ways that I planted some poor choices and harvested some painful consequences. And I can also tell you stories of planting better seeds and harvesting a more positive outcome. I can 100% tell you that what you do today absolutely will impact your tomorrow. Think back on some of your big decisions or actions in the past, and I bet that those choices harvested one of two responses. I'm glad I did it, or I wish I had. What choices are you making today that will put you in the first category? And what choices are you making that could land you in the second category? Sin always comes with a warning label. God didn't put those labels there to scare you, to make you feel guilty, or to make you feel less free. No, he put those warnings there so you can experience more freedom, true freedom. That kind of freedom that comes with making choices that make your today good and tomorrow great. We were made to be free, and God wants us to be free from sin and the consequences it brings us. He doesn't want us to miss out on a better future. He wants us to miss out on all the pain sin creates. And the only way to avoid a bad harvest later in life is by choosing to plant good seeds today. That's why free people know their now affects their later.